The strangest part of the Claude Fable 5 story is not that a powerful AI model got restricted. It is that Anthropic spent years telling everyone frontier AI might become so powerful that governments would have to intervene. And then, the government intervened. Fable 5 and Mythos 5 went from launch week flex to export control problem almost instantly. Reports say the US government ordered Anthropic to suspend access, citing national security concerns around a possible jailbreak or cyber-related vulnerability. Anthropic disputes the idea that the issue was uniquely catastrophic, and that part matters. But the bigger signal is already here. Frontier AI is no longer being treated like ordinary software. It is being treated like strategic infrastructure. And Anthropic helped create that world. The company built its brand on being the serious safety lab, the responsible lab, the lab that understood the danger before everyone else did. That made Claude feel trustworthy, enterprise-ready, and more mature than the usual AI hype cycle. But if your whole message is, our technology is unusually powerful, unusually risky, and unusually important, you cannot act shocked when regulators believe you. The government did not invent Anthropic's safety narrative. It took that narrative literally. And now, Anthropic has a problem that can also become a gift. Because a model pulled by the government does not just look risky, it looks scarce. It looks strategic. It looks like the kind of thing investors, defense agencies, enterprise buyers, and rival labs suddenly cannot stop thinking about. That is why this is bigger than one Claude model. It touches Anthropic's IPO, its giant compute deal inside Elon Musk's orbit, OpenAI's own public market pressure, and the sleeper in the room, Google. While Anthropic and OpenAI fight over the frontier narrative, Google is strangely quiet. And right now, quiet might be strategy. Chapter 1. Anthropic got taken literally. Anthropic launched Claude Fable 5 and Claude Mythos 5, and almost immediately the conversation stops being normal model launch discourse. Instead of just arguing about benchmarks, people were talking about export controls, foreign national access, Amazon red team warnings, and whether a short cyber-related prompt exposed a serious weakness. The exact vulnerability is disputed. Fortune reported that the issue involved a simple fix this code style technique. Other coverage says Anthropic argued the finding was narrow, not unique, and not evidence that Fable was some magic cyber weapon. That dispute matters because governments can overreact. Competitors can frame things aggressively. Security claims can get simplified into scarier headlines than the evidence supports. But the government's reaction still tells us something real. It did not treat Fable and Mythos like a buggy app. It treated them like controlled, strategic capability. And that is the boomerang for Anthropic. Anthropic became famous for saying advanced AI should be handled carefully. That was not just moral branding, it was also business positioning. It made Claude feel safer for companies, more serious for policymakers, and more trustworthy for institutions. But the same positioning creates a trap. If Anthropic says frontier models might be dangerous enough to require serious oversight, then a frontier Anthropic model cannot land as a normal consumer feature. It lands inside the exact policy world Anthropic helped describe. So when officials hear that Fable 5 may have a cyber safety issue, they are not hearing a chatbot had a weird output. They are hearing the safety lab shipped the thing it warned us about. Anthropic wanted Claude to be taken seriously. The government did. Chapter 2. The restriction becomes the ad. This is obviously not a clean win for Anthropic. Nobody wants emergency calls, frozen access, angry customers, and headlines implying the flagship model just became a national security problem. But AI markets are weird. Sometimes the disaster becomes the marketing. If Fable and Mythos come back, and I think they probably do sooner than later, they likely come back with restrictions. Maybe verified identity, maybe US-only access at first, maybe enterprise gating, maybe special review for cyber use, maybe defense or government channels, maybe a version where sensitive workflows are routed through extra monitoring. The exact mechanism is uncertain, the direction is not. This model probably does not return as an ordinary public dropdown. It returns as controlled infrastructure, and that can help Anthropic's story. Every lab says its model is smarter, safer, more agentic, more powerful, and more frontier. After a while, the words blur together, but a model that gets restricted by the government creates a different kind of attention. Our model is so capable it needed controls is dangerous messaging, but it is also unbelievably sticky. For enterprise buyers, it says Claude is not just another chatbot. For defense customers, it says the model matters strategically. For investors, it says Anthropic operates at the edge where policy, compute, and national security collide. That matters because Anthropic is reportedly moving toward an IPO. A public market story needs more than revenue. It needs a myth. OpenAI has ChatGPT, the product that made generative AI mainstream. NVIDIA has the chip bottleneck. Google has the full-stack empire. Anthropic needs to be more than the other frontier lab. This incident gives it a sharper identity. The company whose models are powerful enough that governments cannot ignore them. The risk becomes the moat. The restriction becomes proof. The policy fight becomes part of the pitch. Not how you would plan launch week, but absolutely how a market remembers you. Chapter 3. Compute is the real plot. The model story is loud. The compute story is heavier. Anthropic has reportedly agreed to buy a massive amount of compute from Elon Musk's orbit, with coverage describing a deal around $1.25 billion per month through May 2029. Some reports frame it through xAI and the Colossus data center. Others describe SpaceX-linked infrastructure. The wrapper matters less than the signal. Anthropic is buying frontier-scale compute from one of the only ecosystems on Earth moving fast enough to build that much capacity. That tells us where the AI race really is. It is not just architecture. It is power, land, chips, cooling, fiber, permits, financing, and the ability to turn capital into training runs before the market moves again. If Anthropic is spending that aggressively, then the government did not just interrupt a product, it interrupted the output of a giant capital machine. That is the investor question hiding underneath the headline. Are these models valuable enough to justify the burn? And can Anthropic deploy them without export controls, safety fights, or geopolitical pressure trapping the upside? The Fable situation answers both questions in the most chaotic way possible. Yes, the model looks important enough to trigger government action. Also, yes, that same action can block the business. That is the frontier in one sentence. The more powerful the model becomes, the less it behaves like software. It behaves like infrastructure. And infrastructure gets regulated. That is where the old startup script breaks. A normal software company says, we shipped a better version. A frontier AI lab says, we trained a system that may affect cyber operations, labor markets, national security, electricity demand, cloud revenue, and IPO valuations. That is not a product note. That is a negotiation with the state. Chapter 4. OpenAI and Google. Now bring in OpenAI. OpenAI still owns the consumer mindshare because ChatGPT trained the public. For normal people, AI still means ChatGPT the way search means Google. That is an absurd advantage. OpenAI is also reportedly moving toward its own public market moment. So OpenAI and Anthropic are not just competing on benchmarks, they are competing for the market's imagination before investors see the full public numbers. That makes the Fable incident awkward. OpenAI usually knows how to pull oxygen back toward itself. When Google shows something strong, OpenAI often has a demo, rumor, release, pricing move, or developer feature that recenters the conversation. Google announces, OpenAI absorbs attention. This time, Anthropic absorbed it. Not because everyone agreed Fable 5 was flawless, not because it had months of public testing, but because it became the forbidden object. That changes the comparison. The question becomes not just which model scores higher, it becomes which model is powerful enough to matter to the government. That is a strange contest, and OpenAI may not want to win it too loudly. If OpenAI says its model is even more capable, regulators ask the obvious follow-up. If it says its model is safer and less scary, investors may wonder why Anthropic is getting the forbidden frontier premium. That is the narrative trap. And then there is Google. Google is both the obvious giant and somehow still slept on. It has DeepMind, TPUs, cloud, Android, workspace, search, YouTube, distribution, and enough product surface to make a model unavoidable if it is good enough. Gemini 3.5 Flash already showed Google is pushing on fast, agentic, and coding performance. If a stronger Gemini 3.5 Pro or Ultra tier is close, Google's silence starts to look less like weakness and more like patience. Anthropic is dealing with government restriction. OpenAI is dealing with Anthropic's forbidden model narrative. Google can watch. It can let the others fight over who owns the most dramatic frontier story, then ship the model that actually shows up everywhere. That is the part people miss. AI dominance is not only the best demo, it is deployment surface. Anthropic can have the restricted model. OpenAI can have the cultural product. Google can have the operating system of everyday AI. So the real signal from Fable is not that Anthropic is doomed, or that the government is automatically right. The signal is that capability claims now have consequences. For years, labs could say, "This model is world-changing," then immediately say, "Do not worry, we have guardrails." That tension was always unstable. If the model is ordinary, why is the valuation extraordinary? If the model is extraordinary, why should governments treat it like ordinary software? Anthropic just ran straight into that contradiction. And when Fable or Mythos comes back, it probably comes back with more identity checks, more enterprise gating, more policy review, and more explicit limits around sensitive use. That is not the end of frontier AI. That is frontier AI growing up into infrastructure. Infrastructure is powerful. Infrastructure is valuable. Infrastructure is also surrounded by rules, inspections, approvals, compliance teams, and people in suits who can ruin your Friday afternoon. Welcome to adulthood. Anthropic spent years warning that advanced AI would need serious oversight. Now it gets to live inside the world it described. Maybe the government overreached. Maybe the reported vulnerability was overblown. Maybe the politics were messy. But the strategic lesson is hard to dodge. If you tell the world your model is powerful enough to reshape civilization, do not be surprised when the world stops treating it like a normal app update. OsirisPerseus is about exploring modern topics from breakthroughs to other foundations of science, tech, and engineering. Subscribe to join the expedition.